The chances of you winning the lottery are pretty low, 0.0002% to be precise. It might as well be zero. The chances of you becoming a Premier League footballer, on the other hand, are much higher, 0.012% actually, but that's still a really small number. Just 180 out of 1.5 million British school kids get playing time in the Prem. In the lottery, you have no control over your chances. Absolutely nothing you say, do, or who you are as a person will increase or decrease the probability of you winning. It's complete luck. But in football, no one will tell you that becoming a pro is all luck. And that's because it isn't, right? It's about talent, skill, hard work, becoming the best of the best. Well, that's not necessarily a lie, but it's certainly not the whole truth. The thing is, luck plays a massive factor in everything in life, and especially in football. In fact, it might be one of the most luck-driven sports out there, but we don't really credit it as a deciding factor when we talk about great games, amazing teams, and legendary players. Random moments out of everyone's control can define a match, a season, even a career, but we still do everything in our power to control the outcome. You might have heard people say, "I make my own luck," and on the surface it sounds a bit stupid, but there's actually some truth to this statement, and football might be the perfect sport to explain this. Luck can come in many different forms in football, the most common being in single moments in a game. Tight 50-50s, deflections, bad officiating. It's happening all over the pitch, all the time. The good thing about this is that it tends to even out. They're called 50-50s for a reason. Over the course of a whole game, or longer, a season, you probably won't be a massive beneficiary nor a detriment to luck, but sometimes you might. Let's take this Premier League classic for example. Back in 2009, Rafa Benitez took his struggling Liverpool side to Sunderland in a crucial game. The Reds had already lost to Chelsea, Spurs and Villa, and were slipping down the table. Just 5 minutes in, Darren Bent scored one of the most bizarre goals we've ever seen, a deflection off a balloon that had drifted onto the pitch. It completely blindsided the keeper, who had the initial shot covered, and gave Sunderland an early lead that they managed to convert into 3 points. For Liverpool, this fluke made things go from bad to worse, which eventually resulted in a 7th place, trophyless finish, and Rafa Benitez leaving the club. We can dive into the butterfly effect deeper and deeper, but even something this simple can have a knock-on effect that's much more significant than the randomness of the moment itself. But the thing is, it's hard to quantify how lucky teams get over the course of a season, because while you could write that game off from a Liverpool's perspective as a fluke, I'm sure Chelsea, the league winners that season, would have found a way to win that game 2-1. And then we wouldn't be talking about the balloon as some game-changing scandal, but more of a funny blip in Chelsea's domination. But thanks to advanced metrics that weren't around in 2010, we can try and measure how luck affects the Premier League table come the end of the season. Expected goals is a controversial topic, and its effectiveness as a metric certainly isn't as impressive as the advanced data used to calculate it, and it does get overused in the modern day for something that has to be taken with a pinch of salt. But in this sense, it might be the most accurate way to look at teams that overperform and underperform their true level, whether that be due to luck or other factors. And luckily for us, Aston Villa, and more specifically Morgan Rogers, are the perfect example to take a deeper dive into this. Villa had a shaky start to the season, and didn't score their first league goal until game week 5, but since then they've been on an absolute tear, and now sit just 3rd in the table, just 6 points behind the league leaders, Arsenal, at the time of recording. But there's been quite a lot of controversy with their recent success. Statistically, Villa have been drastically different to the 2 teams they share the top of the table with. They've scored less goals, conceded more, and they have a much lower expected goals. In fact, if the table were based on expected points, they'd be 14th, with by far the biggest overperforming expected goal difference margin. It's actually pretty ridiculous. Their expected goal difference is minus 4.8, meaning that over the course of the season, they should have conceded nearly 5 more goals than they've scored. But while Arsenal and City are thumping teams 5-0 and winning most of their games comfortably, Villa have been edging teams in tight 1-0s, 2-1s and 3-2s. But the common denominator, they all keep winning. And Villa have actually been winning the most. They've won 10 games in a row, and 11 out of 12 in the league, and if it wasn't for their awful September, they could well be top over Christmas. But we all know that they're not quite on the same level as Arsenal and City, so how does this make sense? Is their form sustainable? Are they actually an elite team in the Prem? Or are they a solid team on a crazy run who have benefited from a lot of luck? To try and come to any sort of conclusion, we first need to define exactly what expected goals is, and see how valuable it is as a performance metric in the league format. Expected goals as a metric is what measures how likely a player is to score from a chance, based on the quality of the shot. It uses distance, angle, coverage, and other factors, comparing them to millions of other shots in the Opta database to calculate a number from 0 to 1 to grade the shot. A 40-yard free kick, for example, will normally have a really low expected goals of below 0.1, whereas a penalty, which is scored 79% of the time, has an expected goals of, 0.79. If you use Twitter, you may have seen a popular account, The Expected Goal Philosophy, talk about how Villa are massively overperforming, and that over time, every team will gravitate back to their expected goals and even out across the length of a season. They were determined that Villa's game against Bournemouth, for example, which they won 4-0, should have been much closer, as Bournemouth actually won the game 1.7 to 1.61 on expected goals. But Villa fans will beg to differ. They'll say that the momentum, playstyles and clinicality of their team meant that they should have always won that game. And to be fair, I actually watched the second half, and even though it was already 2-0, Villa did look like the much better team, and they won pretty comfortably. The thing is, the one thing that expected goals fails to factor in is the quality of the player taking the shot. That's why, over time, the better teams towards the top of the table tend to overperform their XG, and the worst teams, with lower quality players, tend to underperform it. Not everyone can just be bang average all the time. So if we look at Villa's situation, we need to somehow work out how good their goal scorers are, and this is kind of impossible. They've been extremely clinical this season, and Rodgers especially has been world class, but he's also the most overperforming XG player in the top 5 leagues this season. If he goes on to replicate this year after year, play for England and win trophies and awards throughout the rest of his career, yeah, we can look back at this Villa run and say, fair enough, they really were that good, and so was Rodgers. But if his form tails off, and Villa slipped to 6th or 7th in the league by the end of the season, in an underwhelming fashion, we could equally be saying, yeah, that purple patch in the winter was pretty lucky. Their results weren't sustainable, and a lot of things did go their way. Villa haven't really had a history of playing this exact way. They do like to counter-attack, play directly, and have used this to beat teams like Arsenal and City a fair few times over the years. But I don't think even Unai Emery would have thought that they'd be on track to break the league record for the most goals from outside the box in a season, or have by far the longest average goal distance since the metric was recorded. But it's been working, and even though a bit of luck does definitely play a factor, you can't undermine all of the other reasons Villa keep winning. They've been resilient, built great habits, and played with intensity in every game in the last few months. Their home ground is a fortress, and their fans play a massive part in why it's so hard to beat them there. Yes, they probably won't continue to score 30-yard screamers every game, and I'm sure a few of those tight 2-1s will go against them later this season, but it's equally an injustice to discredit all of their success just because of a somewhat flawed metric. But what if we're looking at luck in football all wrong? There are just too many factors that play into a team's success, making it nearly impossible to measure how lucky they are. Looking at it from an individual's point of view might offer a different perspective, because a player's career seems to be affected by a lot more externalities than a team's season. In the NBA, 90% of players are drafted into the league after their first year of college, and these players have absolutely zero control over where they end up. Whether you're a nailed-on first pick or a late second rounder, every player can slide a few places, which could be the difference between going to New York or Portland, playing for the reigning champions, or a terrible team going through a rebuild. The latter option sounds less attractive, but as a 19-year-old rookie, it might actually be a blessing in disguise. You're likely to get more playing time, there's no expectations for you to be perfect, and the team will hold on to you as a teenager with potential. Actually, many rookies who get drafted to contending teams struggle to find a fit in an already proven system, and it can really hinder their careers. Whilst the footballing system isn't exactly the same, there's no doubt that the team you play for can make a massive difference for your personal development, even if it's not something that players should really think about too much. Another complete externality which can make or break a career is physical development, and again, it's complete luck. Antoine Semenyo's had a breakout season for Bournemouth, quickly becoming one of the most dangerous wingers in the world, but he actually recently revealed in an interview that he nearly quit playing football. You might think Semenyo is pretty young because of his playstyle and athleticism, but he's been around for ages. He's played for Bath, Newport, Sunderland and Bristol City, as well as numerous different academies as a kid. He admitted that he struggled to find his confidence as he was undersized and couldn't compete physically with grown men when he was a teenager. And that's fair enough. But when he did grow and develop into his frame, his career really started to take off, and the knock-on effect has taken him to the heights of the best league in the world. Sadly, however, this isn't always the case. In fact, it's barely ever the case. Rarely do we see fairy tale stories like Jamie Vardy's, where a late resurgence blossoms into a legendary career. Remember, you might have a 0.012% chance of making it from an academy, but Jamie Vardy is one of just a few players in sporting history to make it after his 30th birthday. It feels like you have to have made it by 20 years old, or at least shown signs of it, before it's too late and other responsibilities in life become more important than a once childhood dream. And nowadays, footballers are getting younger and younger. How is a 22-year-old expected to believe in himself after a decade in footballing systems when 16-year-olds are starting in the Prem? And how many possible superstars will never reach their potential just because they didn't develop early enough? All this poses the question, what can you do as a player when so many things are out of your control? What if you don't get on with your coach? What if your position's too competitive? What if you haven't had your growth spurt yet? As frustrating as it can be, the last thing you want to do as a competitive player is let all these externalities affect your confidence. I play a lot of football myself, so I know this is much easier said than done, but all you can do is control the controllables. You see all the awards, highlights and great moments that all the best players in the world get to enjoy, but you won't see all the times that something didn't go their way. The more you play, the more the luck will even out. And luck itself is just one of the many things that play a part in the career of a footballer. But what if luck itself is controllable? You may have heard people say, I make my own luck before, but they might actually be onto something. And we have to take a step back from football to really understand this. Richard Wiseman is a psychologist who was fascinated by luck, and after decade-long tests with so-called lucky and unlucky people, he found that luckier people actually have personality traits and tendencies that result in luckier outcomes in everyday life. They're opportunistic, not afraid to take risks, and this frequently resulted in outcomes that would normally be deemed good luck. If we take it back to the football pitch, a player who makes twice as many challenges as his opposing centre mid is obviously much more likely to win more duels. And while the percentages may be similar, to the untrained eye it might just look like he's getting way more lucky. On the flip side, unlucky people tend to be more fixated on negativity and what could go wrong, and this makes them miss opportunities and almost manifest their own failure and bad luck. An external locus of control is a psychological term, which measures how much a certain person thinks they are or are not in control of their own life. And people with a high external locus of control might confuse their own shortcomings for bad luck. To put it in a simpler term, it's like a victim mentality. But however you want to call it, it's extremely prevalent in humans, and it can really affect the outcomes in someone's life. If you get benched for a new signing at an academy, and blame it all on your stupid manager and feel sorry for yourself, you're much less likely to improve as a player. But if you see the adversity as a learning opportunity, see the competition as a way to fight for your spot, and give it that extra effort in training, you're much more likely to succeed. Little things like this will happen throughout every footballer's careers, and every person's life for that matter. As crazy as your life and experiences feel, millions of other people are likely going through the same thing, with just slightly different details. The chances that you're actually really unlucky and have gone through one of the most unbelievable, unfortunate series of events are almost zero. The real difference comes with how you respond to those setbacks. For every Antoine Semenyo in the Prem scoring every week, there's another Antoine Semenyo who gave up after they got benched for a more physical winger when they were 17. Fortune really does favour the brave. Luck, if we can even call it that anymore, is actually what makes sports so special, and football might be the sport that epitomises this the most. In the NBA, you have 82 games in the regular season. Then in the playoffs, teams play each other in 7-game series. As much as luck can play a factor in the outcome of one game, the sheer volume of play makes the outcome always veer towards the numbers. Football is a sport of moments, complete dominance countered by a last-minute break, tight games decided by wonder goals, whole seasons and careers altered by injuries. In what other sport can anyone beat anyone at any given moment? To the point where the most advanced performance statistics like expected goals and expected points can almost look redundant because a team just can't stop scoring screamers and winning games. Knockout tournaments take this to another level, and I'm sure the World Cup later this year will live up to its ridiculously high expectations, likewise with the Champions League, the FA Cup. You get the point. Football is the most popular sport in the world for a reason, and while it is frustrating when your team creates more chances and deserves to win a game, but loses, it's easy to dwell on defeats more than enjoy the wins. And this translates into everyday life. If everything were controllable and happened as we expected, how quickly would we get bored of the outcome? A little bit of luck makes everything more special, and gives everyone a chance. If you go through life worrying about how unlucky you are, you'll never understand how unbelievably lucky you are, even just to be able to be watching this video right now and breathing. Gratitude isn't just a feeling, it's a necessity, a skill, a talent. And when people understand that, they can take control of their life, or their football career, in a revolutionary way.